Hello, this is Pami Jaiswal.
Hi, this is Payal Agarwal.
Today, we start our brand new Saransh series on various SEBI laws. Now, what is this Saransh series all about? We are going to do a fast-track discussion on the core content, and that means the crux of any SEBI regulations that we pick up for discussion in each of our episodes. Today is the first episode, and we are going to discuss on understanding the institutional framework under the SEBI listing regulations. Now, why did we choose SEBI listing regulations? Because this is something where I think all the corporate practitioners who are working with and in the entities, they know it so well and it does not require any introduction. Now, the reason for choosing this topic is that India has been witnessing boom in IPOs for almost 3 years in a row, and it is expected that the IPO is going to be on a surge for the upcoming years as well. So, it is very important to understand what would be the compliance areas for a company which was an unlisted public company and which now becomes a listed entity. So starting with this episode, which talks about the institutional framework under the SEBI listing regulations, so there would be 3 broad discussion points. First is the role of the compliance officer. That's something which requires a lot of discussion. Second is the role of the board of directors. That's again something which is so obvious. And we're going to talk on the role, the composition, the appointment controls, remuneration controls in case of the board of directors. Third is the committees of the board and management required to be constituted under the SEBI listing regulations. So starting with the first one, Payal, over to you.
Yeah. So starting with the institutional framework of the listed entity. A listed entity is first of all required to appoint a qualified company secretary as a compliance officer. This compliance officer, just like a company secretary in case of an unlisted company, acts as a connecting link between the board and the regulators. But not only that, the role of a compliance officer is much greater than this. So, Pami ma'am, can you throw some light on the various roles of compliance officer?
Of course, I think Payal, compliance officers, they have so much to do. Like they play a multi-dimensional role in case of a listed entity. Starting with ensuring that there is compliance with all applicable laws. Second, acting as a liaison between, as you mentioned, the board of directors, the management and the regulators and other stakeholders. Third, of course, being one of the most significant tool of grievance redressal in a listed entity, and of course fourth, to also play a very significant role in ensuring a good corporate governance practice in the listed entity. So I think he or she plays a very significant role, and in our upcoming episodes there would be so many times where we are going to discuss or mention about the role of compliance officers.
Right. The second and the foremost pillar of an institutional structure is the board of directors. And as a company graduates from an unlisted company to a listed company, the board composition is something that definitely requires a review. Why so? Because the listing regulations prescribe for a much stricter board composition requirements when it comes to listed entities. Starting with the minimum board strength, the listing regulations require the top 2000 listed entities to have at least 6 directors as compared to minimum 3 directors in case of an unlisted public company. Not only this, top 1000 listed entities are also required to appoint an independent woman director. The criteria of independence as given under the listing regulations is slightly different from that under the Companies Act, and it prescribes for stricter conditions such as restrictions for board interlock positions. Not only this, depending on whether the chairperson of the company is a non-executive, non-promoter director, the minimum independent directors required in the listed entity also witnesses a change. If the chairperson is a non-executive, non-independent, non-promoter director, in such cases, the listed entities are required to have at least 1/3 of the board as independent directors. Otherwise, at least 50% of the board is required to be independent. Not only this, the listing regulations also prescribe a maximum age limit for acting as a non-executive director, beyond which the company is required to take special resolution from the shareholders for continuation of appointment of NEDs beyond the age of 75 years.
So I think next we are going to talk upon the maximum number of directorships which a person can hold. Under the Companies Act, we know it is 20 companies, including 10 public limited companies. But when a person wants to become a director in a listed entity, so this number becomes only 7. So a person can become director in maximum 7 listed entities. Now, if a person is an independent director and that independent director is also acting as an executive director in any listed entity, then the maximum number of listed entities where this person can become an independent director is only 3. Next, we talk about the quorum requirement. So, in case of under the Companies Act, we know the quorum requirement for board of directors is 2, right? But under the listing regulations, this quorum requirement is having 3 directors, including 1 independent director. And in fact, in case of a NRC, that is a Nomination and Remuneration Committee, you need 1 independent director to be personally present as an additional requirement. In case of an audit committee, this requirement is of having 2 independent directors when we talk about an audit committee, right? So I think next we're going to talk about the appointment controls for a listed entity.
Right. So as it comes to a listed entity, the manner of appointment is slightly different as compared to the Companies Act. While the board of directors have a power to appoint an additional director, in order to fill an existing vacancy in the board of the listed entity, the company is required to appoint a director within a maximum period of 3 months from the date of arising such vacancy. If the vacancy arises on account of expiry of term of an existing director, in such cases, the maximum time period of 3 months is also not present and the company is required to appoint a director to fill the vacancy forthwith. Not only this, once the appointment is made by the board of the company, the same is required to be approved by the shareholders within a maximum period of 3 months from the date of such appointment. This period of 3 months will not be available and the company will be required to take prior approval of shareholders if the person who is proposed to be appointed as the managing director, executive director or manager in the listed company was previously rejected by the shareholders.
Right. I think there also becomes, there's another appointment control point under the listing regulations file where they talk about or they show concern on permanency of directorship or the board position, right? You want to talk on that as well?
Yes. So, the listing regulations with effect from 1st April 2024 requires the listed companies to mandatorily obtain shareholders' approval at least once in every 5 years for the continuation or renewal of the appointment of any director, subject to certain exceptions. As for companies where a person is holding directorship for more than 5 years, as on 31st March 2024, they are required to obtain shareholders' approval for continuation of such directorship in the first general meeting that will be held after 31st March 2024.
Right. I think with this, let's come to another topic which is very important. That is the managerial remuneration controls. I think that's very important because for companies who were unlisted public companies, they were all complying with Section 197 under the Companies Act. But here under the listing regulations, there are 2 broad controls when it comes to managerial remuneration. The first control is on payout to any one non-executive director which exceeds 50% of the total remuneration paid to all the non-executive directors. In that case, you need to pass a special resolution. The second managerial remuneration control is on payout to promoter executive directors in a listed entity which exceeds 5 crores or 2.5% of the net profits, and where there are more than one promoter executive directors, the payout exceeds 5% of the net profits. In that case, you need a special resolution to be passed.
Okay. With this, let us move on to the third pillar of the institutional framework under listing regulations, which is the board committees. When it comes to listing regulations, the law requires listed companies to constitute at least 3 board committees on a mandatory basis, which is the audit committee, the nomination and remuneration committee, and the stakeholders relationship committee. Apart from this, for top 1000 listed entities, the listing regulations also require mandatory constitution of risk management committee. Unlike the other 3 committees, risk management committee is not necessarily a board committee. It can have members from the management who are not directors of the company. However, the listing regulations require that majority of the committee members have to be board members. Right? Apart from this, the constitution requirements in case of audit committee and NRC is stricter as compared to the Companies Act, and and requires at least 2/3 of the committee members to be independent directors. The law also requires the Stakeholders Relationship Committee to comprise of at least one independent director, and the chairperson of such committee shall be a non-executive director. Minimum number of meetings have been prescribed for these committees, where the audit committee is required to meet at least 4 times in a financial year. In case of a nomination and remuneration committee, at least 1 meeting is compulsory, and for risk management committees, at least 2 meetings are compulsory.
Right, and I think with this, we come to the end of this first episode, and we hope we've been able to give you some fair idea on the institutional framework under the listing regulations. The second episode, let us inform you, will be on the timely flow of information under the listing regulations. We would be glad to receive feedback on this new series that we've started, and thanks for listening to us.